Back in 2011, a rather odd poster was released online. It said, "What is our one demand?" It was a woman in ballet form right on top of the charging bull of Wall Street. But on the bottom, it had a hashtag. Now, this was the era when Twitter was really getting started in 2011. And the hashtag said, hashtag Occupy Wall Street. September 17th, bring a tent. Now, we're going to learn why September happens to be a rather kind of dramatic day for many New York events. But why was there a hashtag in this rather ambiguous poster about occupying Wall Street? What did that mean? Well, that hashtag came at a time right after the Arab Spring, which was a massive protest all around the Middle East that used Twitter in order to organize and grow their protesters to more than 1 million people. Today we're going to talk about Occupy Wall Street, and we're going to talk about another major event that happened in Wall Street, which was the Wall Street bombings of 1920. Two major events that rocked Wall Street around the same day in September. So I'm Ariel with Urbanist, and this is a show where I explore cities all around the world and show you the history of these places. Let me know where you're watching from, and let me know, have you heard of Occupy Wall Street? Were you here during the time of Occupy Wall Street? We're not going to talk about the politics of these events, we're going to talk about the history. What happened that day? So let me know in the comments, were you around New York City when this happened? And share this video with your friends and family if you want to show them the beauty of New York City. Right now we are in Zucotti Park, and it's completely lit with Christmas lights. It's rather gorgeous. Let me show you around, and let me say hi to everyone who's tuning in. So this is Zucotti Park. Lots of Christmas lights all around. Rather peaceful, rather quaint. A lot of food trucks are all around. Seems like they closed down the street specifically for food trucks. I think the only thing that's occupying this park are the vast amount of pigeons, because tourists are feeding them. Otherwise, you rarely see that many people hanging out in this park. So, what happened in 2011? Well, let me say hi to everyone tuning in first. So let me know where you're watching from. Christmas lights are rather beautiful today, and we're going to walk to Wall Street right after this. Hello Lori, hello Amanda, hello Kitty, hello Raphael, hello Annie, hello Miriam, hello Tereshina, hello Kay. I'm so glad you're looking forward to this. And hello everyone. Hey, how's it going? So, what happened? Arab Spring took over the Middle East. Millions of people were protesting, mostly people in their 20s and late teens. This was a phenomenon in the Middle East, especially after the government went to such a long way to even shut down the internet because so many people were gathering in the streets. But their main tool was Twitter. Now, Twitter has been around for a few years before then. It was increasingly becoming a political tool for the masses. People finding a way to organize themselves in a very quick and easy way to access millions of people. Then came around the housing crisis here in the United States in 2007. The housing crisis was a point where people realized how corrupt certain areas of Wall Street were and how much power certain financial institutions had. This pissed off a lot of people, and hence this poster came out. Now, once this poster came out, a few other major organizations popped out in support of it. One of those organizations was Anonymous. Anonymous is an organization that believes itself to be a righteous tool for democracy and for free speech. And that's when it started gaining traction. 2,000 people started gathering around the New York Stock Exchange on September 17th, 2011. New York City was already well prepared for this type of protest. It happens all the time in New York City. New York City has encountered these protests for its entire 400-year history. However, the protests were shut down because a lot of the protesters were blocking a lot of the business and all the comings and goings of the New York Stock Exchange and all the offices around it. It was bad business for New York City. So the protesters moved only 2 blocks away to a public park that's rather common in this area of downtown Manhattan because every major building, skyscrapers built in the 70s and 80s that exceeded a certain height had to build park right in front of it for the public. But Zucotti Park is special because Zucotti Park is kind of the centerpiece of this area of the financial district. And they decided to come right here. 2,000 or so protesters brought their tents, started camping right in this park. The numbers kept growing and growing and growing. This really took off because then you had over 130 cities protesting all in unison. Hundreds of thousands of people gathering in the streets. Some cities turning rather violent like in Rome. Some cities with police officers using way too much force like in Oakland, California. And here in New York, spreading throughout the rest of the city to places like Union Square Park, Washington Square Park, and even on the Manhattan Bridge. Let's walk around Zucotti Park, and I'll show you, paint the picture more of how the scene was back here in 2011. I actually visited here for a few days, so let's walk around.
Adam, yeah. Oh my God, no.
And let me know where you're watching from.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, hi, as many times as you
For real.
Hello, Dawn. Looks like a great day. It's a very, 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 very cold day today at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Did I say very? Because only a week ago I was wearing shorts and short sleeve shirts. Hello, Karen from a mountain town of Crestline, California. Welcome. Still miss New York City. Look, the Christmas lights are out. We're still 2 months away from Christmas, which is kind of hilarious. Hello, Joshua, Long Island house. Welcome, Joshua. Hello, Andrew. Hello, Lori. Hello, Viorica. Hello, Gustavo. Hello, Shannon from Scotland. Hello, Vilena from Volgograd. Ooh, where's Volgograd? What country? Let me know. What country is Volgograd? And hello, Tracy from Manchester, UK. And the food trucks are making you hungry. And it is a nice atmosphere here. Now, when I visited Occupy Wall Street here in 2011, it was a rather festive scene. The entire park was filled in tents. Some tents very elaborate, filled with a dozen or so people inside. People playing games, people writing and drawing posters. Some of the posters claiming that they were in the 99% going against the 1% were actually very gorgeous, beautiful pieces of art. And you had people of all ages and all walks of life hanging out in this one singular park. Despite the politics, which frankly wasn't my interest then, isn't my interest now, despite that, it was actually a scene of people coming together. And it was actually rather beautiful to see. It was so beautiful that even Mayor Bloomberg said they can stay here as long as they want. And it wasn't an issue. It wasn't an issue until it started becoming an issue, when it started spreading all around cities, and the people kept on coming. It wasn't just 2,000 people anymore, it was 3,000, 10,000, 100,000 people. And then you started having major celebrities like Mark Ruffalo and Anne Hathaway and many others joining the protesters. This became kind of a bad image for New York City. They didn't want to be associated with the start of a revolution. So they started clamping down, and they brought the police here. The tents started going all down. People started moving around to other parks. And that's when the Occupy Wall Street didn't die. Hey, how's it going? It didn't die. It's continued on for a few more months. So you could just imagine tents all around here. I think I saw a 2-story tent that was that extreme. There was really elaborate tents all around. People were making food, as I said, drawing posters. You imagine all these tents that you see here were just on the park and covered. People were actually sleeping here for weeks at a time. Some people even stayed here for the entire duration of, I think it was a month or two, that the protests were here in Zucotti Park. Now we are surrounded by the skyscrapers of New York City, the titans of the finance industry. Steven, you were working at JP Morgan for 30 years. Ooh, I'm going to talk about a little bit about JP Morgan. And walking through Trinity burial ground to nod to Alexander Hamilton. It was the most interesting time at the park during Occupy. You're watching from Gaithersburg. Ooh, amazing. Ramonita, hello. Francis, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, it is. Good morning. Hello, Melicidas from Paraguay. Hello, Brian. Nice to see you again. And the food trucks are making you hungry. Amazing. All right, let's walk around and let me paint the scene a little bit more for you. There's a lot of food trucks here. A lot of the food trucks you've seen in my other live videos, such as jerk chicken, chicken and waffles, arepas, etc., etc., etc. Now, at some point in the protest, people are also bringing on their own generators. One of the reasons New York City used force in order to evacuate people was saying it was becoming a fire hazard, because there were so many concentration of people hanging out in one singular place, bringing on their own generators and tents that, frankly, some of them could have been flammable. That was one of the reasons New York used to start evacuating the people. There was also a very accepting vibe when I came here. It was easy to walk in right in the height of Occupy Wall Street, and easy to just like chat up people. I just sat down, people were asking me and my friend questions, and we were all just having a good time. It was rather easy. I didn't protest myself, but I just came in and visited. It was kind of a blast. However, Wall Street came a long way to lead to the events that happen here. The events that happen here are a much more peaceful progression of what transpired nearly 100 years ago, back in September 1920. Those events are only 2 blocks away, right where Occupy Wall Street started, right in front of the New York Stock Exchange. Let's go. So let's say goodbye to Zucotti Park, and let's go to Wall Street proper. Hello, Bill. I hope the signal gets better. Let me know if everyone's seeing the signal fine. Hello, Damonita. Welcome. And let me know if you're just tuning in. I'm Ariel with Urbanist. Now, all along the floors down here, you'll see all the ticker tape parades that have gone down here through Broadway. This is Broadway. We're only a block away from Wall Street. All the major ticker tape parades that you see from all the photos of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people gaining the streets, throwing those beautiful little ticker tape parades, similar to like confetti. That all happens right here. And on the streets, you'll see the sign that marks each ticker tape parade that happened. But there was one specific ticker tape parade that happened. 1919, the end of World War I. World War I was an interesting time for the United States because the United States was deeply immersed in a massive immigration wave. Mostly Italian Americans, also people coming from all around Eastern Europe. Second, the war was also rocky times for the United States. The United States didn't, a lot of people didn't actually want to be in the war. So a lot of people spoke out against the war. They didn't want to be involved with foreign politics. Only about 60 years after the events of the Civil War, people were already still kind of reeling from that. They still heard it from the parents and the grandparents. They didn't want the U.S. to be involved with someone else's war. So there was a lot of people speaking against it. In World War I, Woodrow Wilson signed a law against espionage and sedition. That law made it specifically illegal, an arrestable offense, to speak against the U.S. government. This wasn't only a measure to control the population here in the U.S. in order to maintain the war effort abroad. It was also a measure against the immigrants coming here. Which brings us to 1919, the end of World War I. But the fear of immigration did not stop there. The Italians that were pouring in here were people from another world to most Americans. They weren't used to these Roman Catholics who worship the foreign pope, who had different political ideologies from them coming here and taking their jobs. Of course, this was blown way over proportion, but in Italy at the same time, there was a massive unification movement. And Italy was also in big political turmoil because a lot of people in Italy were against having an empire, a king or a monarch, and also against having a democracy because they saw how democracy failed many European countries and they saw how monarchs failed many other European countries such as Russia, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire. So many Italians were veering for no politics at all, no political organization, no government at all, just pure anarchy. That was the belief among a certain population in Italy. And a very tiny population of those Italians were coming here, which caused Americans an extra amount of fear. Bill, try to refresh your Facebook page or your Facebook app. And hello, Naomi. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for asking. Hello, Monita. I'm glad you're not having problems. And hello, Priscilla from Midtown. So you could just imagine hundreds of thousands of people gathering the streets here, celebrating the end of World War I. But the fear did not stop there for foreign overthrow.
And then I'm gonna do it after him.
Here's Trinity Church, the most richest church in all of America. $3 billion it's worth. And let's go pay a visit to Alexander Hamilton's grave. Lorraine, hello from Dundalk, Ireland. Welcome. So here's Wall Street. We'll be walking here soon, but let's take a tiny historical detour into Trinity Church. Let's go. And if you're having bad signal problems, just try refreshing your app or your page. I think you'll be good once you do that.
Behind the church.
So this is Trinity Church and its grave. And there's one particular grave I want to show you today, right now, before we continue our story. So how did we get a Wall Street? Well, beyond the street being named Wall Street because there used to be a wall during the Dutch era, beyond that, how did we get the institution of Wall Street, the financial institution powerhouse of Wall Street that ended up really taking a lead in the world stage after World War I, where the US finally became a creditor nation, no longer borrowing from Europe, but actually lending money to Europe? How did we get to that spot? Well, we can thank specifically one man, one of the founding fathers of America, Alexander Hamilton, who solidified our financial institutions here in the US. The Department of Treasury and also the very first New York Stock Exchange was started in the Tontine Coffee House. It was because of Alexander Hamilton that the US really took a strong stance in figuring out its finances and financial institutions first and foremost in order to be a part of that world leadership community of the West. So the reason you see pyramids on top of his gravestone is because he was a Freemason. Freemason is the organization, the fraternity of major people all around the U.S. And most of the founding fathers as well. So yeah, they are remodeling the church right now inside. So inside is going to be remodeled, but they also clean Hamilton's grave. They polished it. It's a nice, beautiful white. It used to be, of course, a lot darker, similar to the gravestones you see here. But Hamilton has been such a popular figure recently, mostly due to the popularity of the play by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is a Puerto Rican American, just like myself. That play has become such a hit that a lot of people are now visiting Hamilton's grave. Also, this broadcast right now is powered by the Live View Solo, so I'm live streaming right now from my DSLR camera in crystal clear, high definition picture and sound. That's why I'm not responding to the comments as quickly. Usually when I do these live broadcasts, it's a little bit hard to respond to comments quickly, but I hope you're enjoying the more cinematic appeal. So, we know the origins of Wall Street loosely. I didn't go too much deep into the history of that. You can see other broadcasts for that. And we heard about Occupy Wall Street. So what led to Occupy Wall Street? Well, I mentioned the upheaval that happened during World War I. Right after World War I, there were many protests happening all around the world. It was like Occupy Wall Street, except a lot bloodier, a lot more of a revolution. This was happening in Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution that ended up overthrowing the monarchy of that country and establishing a communist dictatorship. Then you had the communist revolutions all around Germany and many other countries around the world, like Argentina, and also communist revolutions, smaller ones in England and a few other countries around Europe, and also some communist uprisings here in the US. The communist uprisings were small, but there was something else in the US brewing around that time. During the war, many industrialists were cutting wages in order to produce more and more and more for the war effort. This was very profitable for the US, especially in providing a lot of machinery, a lot of weaponry for not just the country ourselves, but also for some of the European powers like England and France. We were producing a whole lot. And people's wages were being cut. But that was okay. You're newly come immigrant, you understand that this country is in war for its best interest. You take the sacrifice. So many Americans agreed as well, all around the US. However, something happened where people noticed right after the war that many of these industrialists who ran these massive steel mills, oil companies, automobile companies were actually making quite a killing in profits. While their employees' wages were going down, they were going up and they were making lots and lots of money. This didn't bode well. It didn't bode well because after the war ended, the wages kept going down. And with the wages keep going down, people started seeing something really wrong with what was happening. Compiled that with the Italian American experience and the experience of many other immigration groups. They were not just getting their wages cut, they were also discriminated against. They also had very far less opportunities in the workforce. So many Italian Americans started feeling the call of the Italian Anarchist movement across the pond in Europe. And they were resonating with that. Maybe not doing any political upheaval here, and wasn't really their intention because many Italians moved here with the main intention of going back to Italy. So what they cared for the change wasn't here, they cared for the change back there. But nonetheless, they were meeting here in droves. And many Italian anarchists were gaining huge audiences all around America, anywhere where there was a big Italian population. This leads us just 1 year after the end of World War I. It's 1920. So here is Wall Street, and let's wait until the light changes. This is Broadway, all down here. I've done various Facebook Lives where I walk the length of this area of Broadway. We just came from this cathedral, the church, the graveyard, Trinity Church, worth $3 billion. Now, why is it worth $3 billion? Well, it's because the church has been here since the late 1600s, and it owns a lot of the lands all around. The lands weren't worth that much in the 1600s and the 1700s, but they end up being worth a whole lot the following 100 years after that. Alright, let's go Wall Street, everyone, down here. All right. So the reason there's a lot of railings all around here, you saw the stops for like the roadblocks. Back before 2011, this entire street was very open. You can easily walk through. There was traffic, I think, for a while. All this infrastructure built around the New York Stock Exchange was built because of Occupy Wall Street, because people were actually camping out here first before they went to Zucotti Park. So everyone, welcome to Wall Street. So here is a lot of railings. You see all like the stops for the cars. Now this hasn't been the only time New York City has been in high alert. Oh, Kenny, I'm so sorry to hear your blackout. September 16th, 1920. It was supposed to be a very rainy day that September morning. However, the clouds cleared up and ended up becoming rather beautifully sunny. Rush hour passed and it was noon. As noon came, a horse and carriage rode right into Wall Street. That horse and carriage was rather peculiar because it wasn't housing people. No one was really riding it. It was one man driving it. But behind that horse and carriage was a huge piece of cargo. This was weird, but it wasn't too weird, so no one really specifically stopped that carriage. It got really weird when the carriage stopped right here in the middle of Wall Street. Now that carriage in the back, no one knew, but the man just stopped, waited for a few seconds, and then a massive explosion just hit all around Wall Street back in 1920. It hit people all around. The carriage ended up being filled with tons of dynamite. Hundreds of tons of shrapnel attached to that dynamite. Dynamite exploded, shrapnel went flying off all around Wall Street, instantly killing 30 people. Glasses started shattering. Windowsills up there started going in fire. And over 140 people were injured. Why? What happened? Why did this happen? Well, let me go show you a photo before we get into the story. All right, everyone. Let me show you Wall Street over here, and let's get a photo to paint what happened. And welcome, everyone. Nice to see you here. Let me know where you're watching from. You're just tuning in for the first time, and I'm glad so many people are tuning in. Share this video if you're interested in history and love history and want to learn more about it. Now, we are right on Wall Street, right in front of Federal Hall. So, September 16th. Remember, I said September has been kind of a volatile month for the financial district of the United States, of New York City. Of course, we all know the events that transpired September 11th. It's a very sad moment in recent New York City history, and I did a broadcast talking about the events in the memorial built in its honor a few weeks ago, so you can check that out. I mentioned Occupy Wall Street started in September 17th. But this was September 16th in 1920, well before we really had this concept of terrorism. But what transpired that day? What happened that day? Well, what happened was the explosion. The carriage rode right into the middle of Wall Street. Hundreds of pounds of shrapnel went flying all around. If you don't know what shrapnel is, it's a very sharp material. It's very sharp pieces, sharp objects meant to cut. So you usually put shrapnel in a grenade, shrapnel in a bomb, shrapnel whatever in order to have a greater impact. And this ended up being the scene right over here on the Wall Street. But what happened? Who was this for? Why did they stop right in front of the Federal Hall? Let me show you a newspaper clipping. It says scores died, 200 people injured. The cause is a mystery. Right after that, they say who the true intention of attack was. The Morgan Bank wrecked. Hundreds of people were gathering to see the scene. People lay dead along the side of the streets. It was all by all means a horrific scene. But the main intention for attack wasn't the beautiful Federal Hall, who honored the founding fathers. I think whoever attacked this didn't really care too much about Federal Hall. What they cared about is this building right in front of Federal Hall, the J.P. Morgan Bank building. Now, the J.P. Morgan Bank building, as you can see, is a fortress. It's huge. It's massive, thick walls. But why J.P. Morgan Bank building? Well, at the time, J.P. Morgan was the richest man in the United States. Well, you can say a few others might have been as rich or a little bit richer, but by all means you can say J.P. Morgan was on the very top of that list. Beyond that, he amassed mass amounts of power. So much so that he had the political leanings from a president. He started pressuring the president. He started gaining more and more power. He started reigning over many industries beyond just the finance industry. Many other industries, including electricity, including radio, including oil, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on, and it gets very long. So people did not like J.P. Morgan because he represented the 1%. The same terminology used back in Occupy Wall Street. He was the man in power while everyone else was suffering. Now, again, we're not talking about the politics. This was just mostly the rhetoric of the time. So, who was the perpetrator? Well, the interesting thing is, after the attacks happened, no one really knows. No one claimed to have actual responsibility over the attacks, which is rather strange for the type of attack that ensued. So, who was at fault? Well, there was a few theories. One, it was a tennis player U.S. champion tennis player. His name was Edwin, with the last name Fletcher, I think. Fleischer, something around there. And this tennis player sent warnings to his friends via mail. These warnings got leaked immediately after the attacks because his friends were kind of worried that maybe he had something at play. The warning said to avoid this very area on September 16th. Now, that tennis player has really no motive. He wasn't involved in politics. He wasn't really involved in really anything political. He was just the champion tennis player. So the police investigated him, and they found out that he sent these warnings fairly frequently to a lot of his friends. Warnings of all kinds. Some true, some not. A lot of people had no idea how he got these warnings from, or these inklings of intuition. He said that he heard them through the air. So the police pretty much determined that he was insane. He was charged with insanity for sending all these warnings, and he was committed to Amityville Hospital of the Amityville Asylum for the mentally insane. So it wasn't him. Who else could it have been? Well, I mentioned the main fear that was happening in the U.S. at that time. The main fear was communism, labor unions, and anarchism. Communism didn't feel too strong here because that was still happening mostly in Europe. Labor unions could have been. They started investigating a few labor unions. But there was also a political agenda in America. Americans didn't like the Italian immigrants. They saw them as foreigners, which is kind of silly to think about because nowadays Italians are seen just as white as any other American, and the foreigners are now Hispanic Americans or Middle Easterns or Indians or Chinese. But they didn't like Italian Americans. They wanted them out. They started putting quotas on immigration. And as the anarchists started coming here to the US and protesting for anarchism in Italy during the Italian unification period, two men stuck out more than any of the others. Socco and Vanzetti. He was a shoemaker and he was a fishmonger. Both Italian Americans who were also outspoken, outwardly anarchists. Now these guys drew huge crowds here in America. Their intention was to change the lifestyle of the Italian American, but not through changing its political system of the US. But their other desired outcome was to change the political systems of Italy to make anarchism. Now, at the time, Italians were getting a bad rap, but they were, most of them, 99% of them were hardworking people, as many of you know, as many of you are related to. So, who were these two, and how did they come into the picture of this attack? Well, these two end up being implicated for murder. During a bank robbery in one of the small towns in America, the police officers said that these two were implicated in that robbery and for the murder of one man that was unfortunately killed during the process of that robbery. Now, that robbery was circumspect because these two men were many miles away at a political rally at the same time as the robbery, giving a speech about anarchism to a large group of Italian Americans. They had a pretty solid alibi, but the police, the district attorney general, weren't buying it. They thought that they were guilty, and hence this huge trial took place, and they were the center of attention here in American politics. A lot of people wanted them out, especially the Italian American population, who knew that these men were implicated. These men were not also criminals. They weren't criminals. They were just political activists. Now, right after the bombing, a few flyers went out demanding for the freedom of Socco and Vanzetti, demanding for their freedom. They were in jail after the trial, sentenced to death, and they wanted their freedom with these flyers. So the next suspect ended up being a man that was closely associated with Socco and Vanzetti, and this man's name was Mario Budo. Mario Budo, another Italian anarchist closely associated with Socco and Vanzetti. However, Mario Budo didn't seem like a likely candidate either, because the strange thing was that even though there was flyers being spread immediately after the bombings of Italian anarchism and demanding the freedom of these two men, Mario Budo was in Sicily. He wasn't here. So how could a man be in two places at once? No one knows. Who else was there to implicate? No one. No one came through to these bombings. No one admitted to them. No one claimed responsibility for them. 38 people dead, 140 seriously injured. Most of them clerks, men of the post office, women, and children. Almost no one that was in the attacks were people of Wall Street. Who was responsible? To this day, no one really knows. And thousands of people walk here every single day and had no clue that these attacks happened. Even when there are some scars that are completely obvious. Let's check them out. So hello, Jackie. Never knew there was a Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Yes, there was. Or ever heard about the event. Yes, this was back in 1920, so the event has been long forgotten. Jackie, you say I would be a great history teacher. Thank you so much. Hello, Anna. Hello, Natasha. And Christine, yes, I'm back. And are we gonna see the bull and the little girl today? No, not today, Don. But you can see the previous videos if you want to check it out. All right, so Let me show you one more time before we go. You can imagine the carriage road right in here, right in the middle, and that's where the explosion transpired. This is the JP Morgan Bank building. It's not really occupied anymore. Now, another strange thing people said that they saw was someone giving signals on the New York Stock Exchange. Apparently, on these windows, right when the man rode in, there was a few people giving signals out. But that might have been just the stock workers, and it was fairly normal for stock men to give secret signals to the JP Morgan Bank building workers, because JP Morgan didn't play entirely according to the rules. That was another grievance of many of the Italian anarchists and all the people, all the labor unions, and all the people rioting against these major financial industrialists. It's because JP Morgan got tips, hot tips, immediately from the New York Stock Exchange right across the building. So this massive building, what happened to it during the explosion? Well, shrapnel flew all around. It harmed a lot of the buildings around, but the scars are still visible here today. Right here are the scars from the shrapnel that came from the horse carriage on September 16th at noon in 1920. You can touch them today. Nope, they're not decay from this beautiful, huge building. They are the scars of that terrorist attack. And they're all around. You can see up there, and some of them go much further up. Let's zoom in. You see them right there. But the building stood standing. And that brings us to another major mystery of that attack. If their intention was to blow up the JP Morgan Bank building, why did the man on the horse and carriage stand many feet away from it that wasn't quite effective? No one really knows. And why are the scars still here when you don't see the scars of shrapnel on the Federal Hall? You don't see it on this building. I'm not entirely sure how old this building is, but it might have been standing. You don't see it in the New York Stock Exchange. Why are they visible here in the JP Morgan Bank building? Well, they asked JP Morgan, and JP Morgan was a very strong, imposing figure. The man was huge, had a big nose because he had a disease where the nose grew abnormally large. And they asked him, JP, why did you decide not to fix these holes? And he said, because I want to show that no one can ever bring down the JP Morgan Bank. He wanted these scars from the terrorist attack to be visible reminders that he was impenetrable, that he was infallible, that he could have been taken down. About 9 years later, in September in 1929, JP Morgan was put into the test once again when men all around Wall Street were in panic. Sheer panic because the stock market crashed. Some men were reportedly throwing themselves out of the windows of these Wall Street skyscrapers. And who was to blame? A lot of people. A lot of things. But a lot of people blamed specifically one man, JP Morgan. Now, he wasn't specifically the one to blame, but he was a target during that time as well, and he also came under the test once again 9 years later. So it's funny to think about how almost a century later, we go from a massive attack, all this upheaval with labor strikes, anarchist revolutions, communist revolutions, all this upheaval for a better economy and a better democracy. And then 100 years later, we see the same thing in Occupy Wall Street, albeit a lot more peaceful, a lot more calmer in most areas. Of course, there was some violence, but it was very little. And not quite as extreme as it used to be. So history does repeat itself, I think. And I think one can learn a whole lot about history. One can learn how to prevent further things like these attacks in 1920. But it repeats itself with diminishing returns. Every time it repeats itself, it's a paler version of itself. It's a softer version of itself. So I think overall humanity is getting better. And despite all the politics, I think all this upheaval, all this arguments, all these collusions of ideals, all are leading to a much better place. Whoever wins for a while and loses for a while, whoever shifts the scales, whatever happens, I think it's all getting better the more we go forward. Because when you learn of a story like this in 1920, you realize that things were actually quite bad back then. That things are not getting worse, they are getting better. They're getting safer. Just this past weekend in New York City, we had a rather weird milestone. There was 0 violent deaths in the entire weekend. Crazy to think about, because back in the 1970s in New York, you had more than 700 per weekend. Some weekends, or some weeks and months. 1,000, 10,000 plus, I'm not sure the exact number, but there was a lot. Now, it has trickled down nearly down 70% from the numbers of the 1990s. Massive decrease in crime. And it goes to show, what's our future? I don't know. But I think we're getting better and better and better. And I'm actually kind of glad that JP Morgan decided to keep these scars for an attack that still remains a mystery and no one really knows who was the perpetrator. There should be a plaque that says Jackie. A lot of people don't want to remember that, especially since it was so kind of random. Senseless acts of violence sometimes feel rather kind of a disdain off of our memory. A lot of people don't want to remember something like that. The church right there is Trinity Church. That was the church we briefly visited earlier in the broadcast. And thank you for sharing these sites of history. I'm so glad, Kay, and hello Christine, and hello Ermis, and thank you everyone so much for tuning in. So right here, once again, Federal Hall, New York Stock Exchange, the JP Morgan Bank building, and let me finish up here. So if you're just tuning in, let me know where you're watching from, and let me know what's your favorite part of New York City. What do you really love the most about New York City? This broadcast was powered by the Live View Solo, where I'm able to live stream in HD quality picture and sound. If you want to learn more about it, you can check out my video, which I'll be linking in the comments below. If you want to see more videos like this, you can like this page. I'm Ariel with Urbanist. Once you like this page, you'll be able to see more videos pop up right into your feed. But however, Facebook is not prioritizing videos from pages anymore on your feed. So if you want to be alerted, the link to learn how to add notifications whenever I go live is right in the description of this video. So click on the description of this video, you'll see the link. It says get alerts. You'll learn how to have alerts anytime I go live. And if you want to become a supporter, to lend your support to Urbanist so I can keep doing more videos like this in interesting places and we can all explore these places together on live video, you can donate for $5 a month on Urbanist right by becoming the Become a Supporter button right on the homepage. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in. Let me see if I have any last remaining questions. I'm so glad. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, press that heart button. My husband is wowed by your videos. I'm so glad. I was super inspired by this story because I think it all ties together rather and oddly neatly. And I was there with you 2 weeks ago, says Angela. Oh yes, Angela, yeah, we met only a few blocks away. And Janice, welcome. And point taken, I was just thinking of the one that would mark the historical importance. Yeah, Jackie, I do understand what you mean. I think the reason is because of it's a senseless act of violence that people rather forget. And I'm in love with the city. Amazing, so glad. All right, everyone. Again, it's such a pleasure to share these stories of history. I won't be going live as often because I'm trying to find better stories to tell, so stay tuned 3 or 4 times a week. Once we go to a new city, we might be going a little bit more often, so stay tuned for that. Keep being awesome, and always, always keep on exploring. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.